Hello, everyone, again, and welcome to another episode of the Top Cyber Pro podcast. As usual, I'm the founder and CEO of TopCyberPro.com. Here with another wonderful guest. We have Will Reed, and he's also known as the GRC coach. So, if you don't know anything about what GRC stands for, you're about to find out, and you're going to learn a lot in this session about that from the man right here. So, without further ado, Will, introduce yourself and let's learn a little bit about you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. And certainly a privilege being on your podcast. That's definitely appreciate the invite to come and speak to your audience. And so a little bit about me. I am a father of five. I've been married 21 years. Yeah, five kids. Yeah, like yeah,
21 years,
it's a full handful
congratulations.
and they are a handful. And so my wife has been with me the entire journey, and it started off in the Army. So I spent 20 years in the Army, and I was everything from what was the equivalent of a help desk. So I supported military intelligence systems. And so I did everything from, general help desk, system admin, network admin, IT project management, all the way up to what's the equivalent of like an IT director. And within that journey, I also did a little bit of what the Army calls information assurance, which relates to information security. And I dibbled and dabbled in that enough to get a few certifications along the way, either through the Army or through Western Governors University. Shout out. I know you're an alumni as
Yeah.
well. Shout out to WGU.
Night
And uh,
owls.
and so yeah, that's right, night owls. So as I was transitioning out, I got my bachelor's degree in network operations and security with WGU. And the first role I got, and I was applying everywhere. And so if you'd imagine having, I was all things IT, and I did system admin, network admin, IT project management, information assurance, information security. And I was just throwing my resume out there. And where it landed was a role supporting a TSA contract under the role of compliance specialist. So I was a compliance specialist supporting TSA information systems. They had to maintain an authority to operate, and I was responsible for uh, a few systems. They had about 90 systems. Our team had he had about 9 or 10 systems per person, and we had to make sure that we monitored that system across all stages of the RMF cycle. And yeah, and I ended up doing security controls assessment with that same contract, or yeah, security controls assessment with the Secret Service, same company, different contract, risk assessment, risk management type of work, and then I ended up leaving that company and working with a provider of small, mid-sized business IT services. And they also did some cybersecurity work, a company out of Midwest called Heartland Business Systems. And that's where I started consulting, doing security program consulting, something I never did before. But I got recommended by one of the guys that actually used to work for me when I became the compliance lead over the TSA side. And so I did everything from supporting businesses that were completely mature. They had all I had to do was step in and be part of their risk management team, do a couple of maybe annual risk assessments, review information security policies. On the other end of the spectrum, it was small, mid-sized businesses that had no cybersecurity program whatsoever, and you had to build it up from ground up. So, and then eventually I got to the point where I saw the need for there to be just working with small, mid-sized business. I found out like more often than not, they didn't have a cybersecurity program. And so I wanted to support some businesses in my local area. I'm from Augusta, Georgia, or that's where I'm currently located.
Okay.
And I decided to try to be able to provide services around my local area. This is where my kids go to school, this is where I pay my taxes. If you're familiar, last year there was a cybersecurity attack on the city of Augusta. And so those types of things don't really sit right with me. And so I started my business. Well, lo and behold, a lot of people came and found me out, not for my small and mid-sized business consulting, but to get into cybersecurity. And so ended up providing some support to people that are trying to break in to the industry. And so looking at things like entry-level GRC roles is what I started designing some programs around, because I put myself in that mindset of, man, like I remember when I made that transition, even though I was kind of 20 years in IT, I had about 10 years in information security-ish type work. And I was drowning when I first got that role in the TSA. And I imagined like, hey, I can imagine people not even having that background that I had. How
Mhm.
much are they struggling trying to get the right information, getting into the right environments, right training, right advice? And so that's where I've been spending a lot of my time is trying to help out people trying to break into the cybersecurity industry. And that takes me to where we are today.
Excellent. And everything you just covered there, with just a super quick synopsis of your career, all the hats and the positions you've been in, when you mentioned eventually working your way up, you as a security controls assessor, just kind of put that in perspective for anyone watching. When you go from the service desk to analyst, you're doing engineering, you're doing, network operations, all the hats that he wore, it gave him all those different perspectives and views of an enterprise network and then all the operations that it entails for protecting the data. And so when he's a security controls assessor and he's having to do interviews with network folks, systems folks, and everyone in between, he has all those unique perspectives. And not a lot of people have that. You might have someone that was a network guy or only a systems guy, but Will here, he's covered the whole gamut. So he brings multiple perspectives into whether he's doing auditing and now that he's, paying it forward. What I love the fact that you're all in on your community and helping out your local community and that's just amazing to hear that. So Will, what I want to do though, there's a couple acronyms she did say in there, and then for anyone brand new watching, we want to kind of break it down for them. So, I mentioned earlier you're the GRC coach, right? And you mentioned that you do a lot of focus on the GRC and the compliance and so forth. Could you maybe just give us a high level, one break down the acronym for us and just kind of tell us what it is and why it's important?
Absolutely. So governance, risk, and compliance is what GRC stands for. And so on the governance side, this is where an organization and the executives that are overseeing an organization lay out the foundational principles that they want the company to abide by. They lay out the expectations and then how that security program should operate, what key objectives they need to hit in order to help support mission objectives. So that's governance and how we then regulate what's going on within the organization. On the risk side, it's really risk management. We say risk for short,
Mhm.
and this is about identifying the threats and the things that could cause disruptions to the business. And then where we focus in on is where there are our cybersecurity or IT infrastructure vulnerabilities or challenges or even procedural challenges that need to be addressed in order to mitigate risk or help the organization properly manage and account for risk. And then on the compliance side, this is where you identify all of the regulatory, legal, and compliant or standards that an organization would have to adhere to, specific to like the IT and the cybersecurity side of things. Things like if you're processing credit card data, you have to comply with PCI DSS standards as enforced by the payment card brand like Visa, MasterCard. And so there are a list of standards that have to be adhered to in order for them to process credit cards, for example. And so this is where the organization identifies what those requirements are, and then they align their policies and procedures to meet those requirements. So that's in a nutshell what governance, risk, and compliance is.
Okay. And so you mentioned something really important is like protecting credit card information, right? But yet, not a month goes by where we don't hear of another business, whether it's a Home Depot or a fast food company or some business that's having, credit card information, customer information, exfil data breached and stolen, right? Information stolen. But a lot of these industries do have these laws, regulations, and
Mhm.
standards. So, from your perspective, what is causing the ease of hackers and attackers to be able to get to this information if there are regulations and standards for these businesses to follow? Is there something that every business is getting wrong? Are they not following the procedures, policies, and regulations? From your perspective, what is leading into these breaches that we pretty much hear about almost every week, if not every month?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I see is that there are a couple of different things that play into why a company could get breached and why sensitive data could get exposed. One of those things is just um, failing to implement what those standards are. And what I found with a lot of my small, mid-sized business clients is they're very good at doing what they do to provide products and services for their clients. However, when it comes to data protection and setting up the infrastructure and implementing the right controls, they don't necessarily have the on-site or on-hand or employed people in order to address those directly. And what ends up happening is the IT guy, it's usually a couple of guys sometimes, and they're neck deep into infrastructure. So they have these virtual servers, they have workstations, they have networking, they have firewalls that they have to configure, and they're just trying to keep the business up and operational.
Yeah.
How do I keep everything talking, everything communicating, everybody's able to access what they need to, website is up, all that. Well, cybersecurity is its own demographic, it's its own distinct domain that has some specialty to it. And a lot of time, either they might have some knowledge in that space, but a lot of time they don't even have the time to address some of those concerns because they're just trying to keep the ship afloat. And so this is why we try to outsource. A lot of companies outsource to those types of things. And so the other side of it is the understanding of what the requirements are. Like you can read it, but if you read some of these control requirements,
Yeah, it's just
it's even if you're a technical person, like if you're IT and like you're still like I've done audit, like, hey, can you explain what you're actually asking me
yeah.
to accommodate for? Like, hey, like you're asking me, how do I control the flow of controlled unclassified information? I don't know what you're asking for,
Yeah.
right? And so it's just a translation issue where understanding what the requirements. If you don't understand the requirements, you can't implement them appropriately. The last thing I'll say is there's the human element that plays a factor in all of this. And you can have the policies outlined and have all of the things detailed as to what you're supposed to be doing, but it still takes humans to do it. And so sometimes they don't have time to get around to those tasks because they aren't properly resourced, or they're just not implementing their policies. They haven't aligned procedures with policies. And technology changes all the time, and threat actors are very sophisticated. And if anybody wants to get into your network and they have the skills to do so, it's just only a matter of time if they're going to target you appropriately. Right now, it's just about resilience and establishing a defense in depth type of a concept. Now we're kind of shifting into zero trust, but a lot of times we just don't have the layers of security necessary to even find out when we've been breached. So having alerting and monitoring in place to where it detects some of those things to where we might not have prevented it from happening, or at least prevented somebody from getting access, but we at least are aware because we got an alert or notification on our phone, on an email, to where we go in and address that. So those are the things that I've seen, that even though you have those standards that are clearly outlining what best practices need to be input in order to protect that sensitive information, but there are challenges in actually implementing those requirements.
And you said you kind of hit whether you can have the budget to have an IT staff or dedicated cybersecurity professional. When we mention small, medium businesses, they often don't have that. They might be lucky to have the one IT guy, and
Yep.
he has to wear 4 or 5 hats to just get the
Yeah,
business running.
absolutely.
And so, if you are a small, a medium-sized business owner and you're watching this podcast at this moment, you're thinking, "Well, what hope is there for me?" Because if Home Depot and the city of Augusta and all these organizations that have budgets that are much larger than a small, even if you're a sole proprietor, like I don't have a shot at protecting myself from the internet and cyber criminals and so forth. Don't lose heart, because there are things that you can do that are very basic, simple steps that will reduce your attack surface. And so, a lot of folks that you hear about risk RMF, which risk management framework is, it's a wonderful thing. That's a very structured approach to doing defense in depth and all those security controls. But for a small business or a sole proprietor business, you start to go reading these SP, 853 and 53A, and you read these documents, and quickly you're going to be lost, right?
Yeah.
And there's a couple other frameworks out there that may or may not be more conducive for what business you're in and what industry you're in. But I would advocate to any business owner watching this right now, where you're saying, look, I've tried to look at the NIST documentation. It is far beyond me. There are some simpler things that you can start with. And I'm a big, big fan of Australia did something focusing on small business and medium business called Essential 8, which I'll have a link in the description below. So if you're a small business owner, you're like, hey, I need something that's just easy to digest. Essential 8 gives you 8 controls or things that you should do in your organization for security that will at least get you far ahead of most of your peers in your sector or your industry, as a small business, or even down to a sole proprietor. So start with the essential 8. If you can get that down pat, you definitely have reduced significantly your attack surface. And then there's a couple others you can look at. Like, for example, there's a list called the critical security controls done by CIS. And that's another list that you could look at if you want to take it to another step. So if you think Essential 8 is the first step, and then the critical security controls, and eventually work your way up as you mature and as you get better at understanding it. But one of the key things you also mentioned with the personnel is sometimes your staff doesn't have the knowledge and skills. And this is where I advocate for the small to medium, more so to medium-sized businesses. As your business grows, so should your investments into your team, because as you grow, you're also growing in regards to your attack surface. So as you get more customers, as your brand
Mhm.
grows, you're just the bullseye of cyber criminals. You can be like, okay, this business is starting to make money. We're going to go and hit you with a ransomware attack. And this is
100%.
where training, cyber education, and it's not just for your IT team, it's from the receptionist, if you have a business with a receptionist, your service desk, all the way to the executive staff, everybody in between needs to have some cyber education. When we talk about phishing, phishing is still one of the number one attack vectors for ransomware and malware in organizations. So Will, back to some of the work that you do. I really like that you're working with a lot of local businesses in your community. What are some of the challenges you see when working with businesses? Is it purely budgetary issues, or is it more of trying to help these folks understand the threats that they're facing given the size of their business and what their operations are?
Yeah, I would say both. And so part of it is again, their budget is strictly aligned usually to what is moving the needle forward for their business operations, like what is a revenue generating activity, and what and those critical functions are where they're pushing their dollars. The other side of it is on the side of, yeah, just user education and the ability to understand like these threats. These are complex. Oh, I lost my,
Uh,
hold on. There. Oh, somebody's calling me. Give me a moment.
no worries. No.
So one of the challenges is just them understanding the threat environment. Just like you said, it's they're focused on what moves the needle forward for their business, but in terms of understanding what threats are actually out there, one of the things like I recommend, like in addition to security awareness training, is just putting multi-factor authentication. A lot of that is just they have Microsoft M365, even Google. They have G Suite where you just turn on multi-factor authentication, and that stops a lot of those
Yes.
issues that you're going to experience. When you have user education that's stopping or at least preventing and making you aware of phishing attacks and things that are trying to do business email compromise. But on the other side of it is on those accounts is having multi-factor authentication and then a password manager. Those are some things where there's some simple things that you can implement in order to protect your organization and cause you to have some of those basic practices in place to prevent some of these threat actors from getting in. And so those are the some of the common challenges that I see. And then the other thing is just like there are things that they do that could be good practices. They just don't document it, right? And so when you don't document something, you have one person that knows has all the keys to the castle,
Yep.
or that's the one person that has the keys to the IT closet. And then if they go on vacation, then now if something happens while they're gone, they either have to call that person in on vacation, or they're just a flounder sitting on the plate with no water, and it causes some strain and some friction with them being able to continue business operations. So you see a lot of single points of failure in these small, mid-sized businesses as well, especially small businesses. And I see those as some significant challenges that, again, it comes up just being aware of what you don't know. And this is where consultants come in, but also like doing things like tabletop exercises, things like that, to expose some of those areas. Because a lot of times I'll do a tabletop exercise, and it's like, oh, we didn't even think about this one person having all of the admin and nobody else is an admin. If they're gone, or if they decide to leave the company, or they have their own
Business
little Google
stops.
Drive where they're backing up all the files. If they leave the company, now you don't have any backups, you don't have any admin rights, and now you have to almost start from scratch trying to build these things out, have to reestablish infrastructure, right? And that's not fun for businesses.
Yeah. And you said a key thing there. Consulting has been, on the rise for a long time now. And if you are a small to medium business owner, or stakeholder in a small to medium business. It's something that, yeah, you might not have 150, $250,000 to have a dedicated full-time security person. But with consulting, you can do a fraction of a CISO or a fraction, have a audit come and assess your business over a couple business days for maybe, for just 10,000 or less. And that is significantly cheaper than a full-time person. But then you bring in this really high
Yeah.
level of expertise that could take a look into your operations and give you some honest assessments and reports. And so, reaching out to consultants is not a bad thing because again, they'll give you a honest, third party perspective of your business, where a fresh set of eyes, where your IT staff, they see the same things over, and we human nature, we get complacent. We
Mhm.
sometimes overlook things that are right there in front of us, and sometimes having someone come in like what you do quite regularly is come and doing a tabletop exercise and quickly finding where all these security gaps exist that people have just been overlooking. So I think that's really great work. Could you, we could talk a lot about compliance and risk management and so forth, but I know you mentioned earlier that you kind of started off at service desk and worked your way up to all these roles up to where you are today. But I would love to hear what your day one story is, Will. Like when we could go right back to day one when you made the decision that, hey, I want to work with computers, IT cyber, that's what's for me. What's the story, if you don't mind sharing that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I like to tell people is cybersecurity found me, and where like it wasn't even a decision. So back in 2013 is when I got my first cybersecurity certification. That was Security Plus, and this is while I was in the Army. And right, what was happening around that time was DoD Directive 8570 was being implemented, and what that was a requirement for individuals that had elevated privileges on the network or had some sort of security roles within a network, had to meet a certain level of compliance in terms of education and certification, right? Education slash training and then certification. So on the education training side, we met that all the courses that we took in order to manage the systems we had that counted as our operating environment training. But certification was the big hitch. And depending on your role, you had to have, there were certain types of certifications that aligned with your role. And so at that time, my role aligned with the system administrator. And that required something along the lines of CCNA security back then, or Security Plus, and that level of certification in order to be able to have elevated privileges on the network. And because I needed to assign privileges and update permissions and create accounts and all that, those were considered security functions under identity and access management, for example, or access control.
Mhm.
And so I had to go out and get the Security Plus certification in order to maintain my elevated rights. And so that's where I say like cybersecurity kind of found me as a result of DoD saying you will meet this requirement or you will not be able to do your job appropriately. But fast forward, like I said, I kind of I was still kind of on the fence when I was retiring from the military, trying to figure out which route I was going to take because I had such a broad level of experience and types of experiences within IT. And that just happened to be the people that reached out to me. And that was by which I got my CISP right before I retired and got that bachelor's in network operations and security. So on paper and some of the roles, like if you're familiar with the military, and especially if you're active duty, you get placed, like you get a lot of additional duties where you have your primary role. My primary role was IT director, but one of my additional duties was information assurance manager, or information assurance security officer, those types of roles where you had some information security functions, but you weren't full time in it. You knew just enough to be dangerous and then sign off on the paperwork,
Mhm.
right? And so that's kind of what I was doing, and so that again, cybersecurity kind of found me, and that was my first role as a compliance. It was like, hey, and matter of fact, I actually did a talk on this presentation. It was like it caused some significant imposter syndrome for me. as I was transitioning out, because that role I was considered a senior compliance specialist. And I kind of pushed back on that role. I was actually applying to be a program manager. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. I know enough about cybersecurity to kind of guide the ship. And it's a lot of IT. And so like, yeah, I think I can kind of guide things. A lot of my role was, you know, a lot of extreme, or not extreme, but a lot of like enterprise level project management. And so I was comfortable going to the program manager role. Well, they're like, well, you don't have the PMP certification,
Mm.
although you have a couple other project management certifications, but it's not the PMP. So we can't put you, but would you consider one of these other roles? I know it doesn't directly align with your experience, but we like you and we want you to be involved. I was like, maybe. And then it kind of got to the point where like, hey, like a security compliance specialist, you know, like I was like, hey, I think that's a little bit deeper than where I want to be. And so I kind of pushed back. They're like, no, we really want you. So I ended up taking the role. And like I said, I felt like I was drowning, but they said I was doing well. And I was just kind of, what saved me was my experience in IT. And, you know, and I was doing a lot of research on the side. Like I was figuring it out as I was going, but I definitely had a lot of imposter syndrome because I didn't have that depth of knowledge like I had on the IT side, because I was just dibbling and dabbling in security. But GRC is this big beast. And if you're familiar, like TSA operates off of this 853, this 837. And NIST 853 is like the granddaddy of all control libraries. And it was a beast to manage compliance for those systems. So again, cybersecurity found me, and I eventually kind of got my feet under me, ended up being the lead. And again, I was still impossible. Like, why are you selecting me as a lead? Because I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. But again, I encourage hard work and commitment to just trying to shore up your skills in
Yeah.
order to kind of meet some of those requirements. Because any job that we take, there's going to be some unknown. There are going to be some things that you have to learn about that specific environment. And as long as you have a thirst for knowledge and a
Yes.
willingness to grow and have a growth mindset,
Yes.
you can eventually get there.
And I always say if you could read and comprehend, you could do cyber. So you just got to
Yep.
be all in, right? And get
Yep.
your mindset. You got
100%.
to be all in. You know, along your career and your journey, were there people that were mentors to you or leaders that you admired, looked up to, that you just want to shine a light and it's not really meant to be a name drop session. It's more of a paying homage to those that either mentored you, provided you some guidance along your career, or just leaders that, hey, I had some fantastic leaders and whether they're with us or not anymore.
Yeah, I had to go to YouTube University when I was filling those roles while supporting the TSA on the compliance side. And one of the resources that I eventually found was Bruce Brown of Convo Courses. And so he's a GRC practitioner that like is very consistent with posting content and just kind of talking through principles of GRC, what types of roles are out there, how to update your resume, you know, types of training that you can he curates training, but also kind of points you in the direction of resources that you can go to. So he was one. One of the other ones was Dr. Gerald Auger of Simply Cyber. And what helped me out most with him was he had a daily cyber threat brief where he takes actually the global cybersecurity headlines, and he does a real-time commentary on the so CISO series. Actually, they're the ones that curate the content, and they do the summaries of those stories of the cybersecurity headlines. But he does real life commentary as to what that means as a GRC practitioner, as a cybersecurity practitioner, and how that can apply to a role that you're in or a role that you could be seeking in the industry, and helping you understand some of the nuances of what's actually going on. And so, and then I ended up taking one of Dr. Gerald Auger's courses called the GRC Analyst Master Class. And I found this about a year and a half, 2 years after I had started. And as soon as I took that, I was like, oh man, I wish I had this like a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
because it would have helped me connect the dots and have the context I needed to be successful. And so that's what I found on YouTube. And so I found both of those on YouTube, and those helped me immensely to help kind of connect the dots and make that transition to be more GRC minded and understand all the different ins and outs of that particular role, because it's not one of those sexy roles that are out there. Like if you go to YouTube or Google, you're going to find pen tester, you're going to find SOC analyst, security architect, and engineer. And then way down the list, you're going to find GRC. And because there wasn't a lot of content out there, I was grateful to find those resources to help me kind of bridge that gap.
Well, if those channels are still up and there, if you would definitely send me the links. And for those watching, all the links that we're going to talk about is going to be down below in the description. So don't worry about having a Google search. It's just a click away. I like to take a moment because with all of my guests, I like to what I call my moment of levity, where we kind of disconnect from talking to cyber shop for a while, and I do what I call a rapid quick fire round of questions. There's no right or wrong answer. It's purely for fun. So if you're ready, I'll start firing some questions away. You ready?
Let's roll.
All right. First one is Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars,
All
and I
right.
know it. And my mom was actually she did both, and I know some of the people that are Trekkies are really into science like that. I'm like, oh, look at the technology and teleportation, and they get all into that. I'm like, Star Wars is just like, hey, let's just do stuff. Let the Force be with you,
The
and it
Force be
doesn't
with
have to
you.
make sense. You're either on the good side of the Force or you're on the dark side. So Star Wars for me.
One person simplified it for me years and years ago. They said, look, in Star Trek, you need a warp core, a crew of 25 to get it to go to warp. In Star Wars, you just need a Wookiee and a wrench.
That's right. That's right.
All
That's
right, so
hilarious.
here's the next one, cake or pie?
I'd say pie.
And what kind of
Um,
pie?
so, and this is going to be a deep cut, no pun intended. But so I had a friend. I like peach cobbler, but I had a friend that I met at my first duty station in Fort Hood, Texas, and she used to make peach pie.
Peach pie.
And it was absolutely delicious. And so like I like with cakes, it's like a lot of frosting, and it's like it's too sweet for me. Like it's too much. Like I gotta get through all the frosting, and like I like my teeth hurt just like thinking about it. But or the only thing I like cheesecake because it doesn't have a lot of frosting. But yeah, it's pie for me.
All right. All right, here's a tough one. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Ooh, is a hot dog a sandwich? I say yes. It's just 90-degree turn, right? So
Okay.
I'd say yes. I never actually
All right.
thought about that. Yeah, it's a sandwich. We're gonna go with that.
So here's one might take you a moment, but what is the your most favorite book of all time that you've read? And second part of it is, what's the last book you've read?
My favorite book of all time is the Bible. And I attribute a lot of like really most of my success to just abiding by biblical principles, like, making sure that I'm honest and I'm not deceiving people, making sure that I'm considerate of others, making sure that I work hard and like whatever I commit myself to do, that I try to do it well. And so like all of my success principles that I abide by have roots in the Bible. The book I read most recently, and I've actually gotten to the point where I don't finish books, just because, and so a little bit of my background. So I have ADHD. I just got diagnosed with ADHD at age 40, which is wild. And one of the things that I do is I was a serial like book reader. I like read book like and I thought that my next jump in success was the next book. But what I found was I was reading whole books, and because the goal was to get through the book as opposed to applying the principles, I had to like kind of force myself to slow down and like, okay, if I read a book and I find a principle, instead of like skipping past that so I can complete the book, I need to go and implement that principle. And so now I'm actually reading the book called Atomic Habits by James Clear, and that's aligning with some of the things that myself and my family are actually doing. So we have a family group of about 20, 10 or 15 people that are trying to be intentional about the goals that we set for ourselves, and create the systems and habits that are necessary in order to achieve those goals. Because what we don't want to do is continue to set these New Year's resolutions and be the cliche by January 10th. All of those new things that you went, the gym membership, all that started by January 10th, everything is out the window and you're back to doing things as normal. So Atomic Habits helped us kind of put language to and processes behind and understanding towards the type of habits that we need to implement and the type of systems that we need to put in place and focus on, as opposed to just setting the goal and focusing on the goal. It's really about implementing the proper habits and setting the systems in place in order to focus on those, as opposed to, like, again, focusing on the goals. You do the habits, you focus on the daily activities that you can control, and then you eventually inch towards your goal.
Great. So now I want to pivot right back to discussing the GRC, and you're called the GRC coach, right? So if I was a business owner, right, and let's say you're speaking to me, and I'm just going to represent a small to medium business owner in your area, and I'm like, hey, what can you do? What the services and expertise you have? What can you do for my business? So if you was to provide that pitch right now, what would it sound like?
Yeah, so ultimately what every business wants is to be able to increase revenue and provide quality products and services to their customers. What challenges arise as a virtue of that, and especially when we are in this digital age and we have to have a presence on the internet and we have to put certain assets and resources on the internet, it creates exposure. And although we're focusing on providing products and services, there are other threat actors that are out there that are trying to find avenues into the critical systems and the information that we hold near and dear. And when they get access to that system of data, those critical systems, it will cause disruptions in our operations as a business. And while you're moving forward, it will cause you to move backwards if we allow those things to continue to happen. So what I do is, and what we do at Better Everyday Cyber, is we go and we try to help you illuminate some of those challenges and holes and gaps in either what you're doing in terms of how you're operating your business and in your technology and cybersecurity footprint, so that we can present a difficult barrier to cyber threat actors. And I'll relate this to the Army. Is like, we call this a hard target. So enemies like to look for a soft target. And what that means is, if I'm an enemy and I'm seeing that you don't have a guard force and you don't have a gate, you don't have gate security, you're going to be easy for me to breach, because I don't have to navigate past all of these barriers and protection points. And so those are going to be the ones that threat actors really gravitate towards, because it's easy. As opposed to presenting a hard target, I have guards, I have armed guards, I have gates, I have security systems on that gate. So when I hit that first barrier, like, oh man, this is going to be hard for me to do. So why would I waste my time on this when there's somebody that has their door wide open down the street? So we want to help businesses become hard targets for threat actors and be resilient by implementing the right processes and procedures and best practices that help protect your organization, so that even if you are breached, we can at least be resilient against that threat, understand when it's coming in, and then have the right protective measures and detective systems in place in order to be able to be alerted to those things, so we can catch it sooner, and it mitigates and reduces the amount of damage that somebody can do, right? And so a lot of this is creating the systems and documentation necessary to outline what the expectations are, and then put the right systems in place in order to protect the organization. And
And
some of these
basically
things are
let the
very,
hackers and attackers know, hey, don't mess with Augusta. Go over to Charleston or somewhere else. Don't mess with Augusta, because we got Will out there looking out for businesses out there. Will,
absolutely.
another question I like to ask all my guests is, what are some charities, volunteer, nonprofit work that either you give your time, energy, and money to, and even if you're not actively involved with those nonprofit charities or volunteer work, ones that you just want to shine a light on that are near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, so I got a couple of things that I do, and so I have the actually my local church. I actually provide some IT and cybersecurity services to them, at a pro bono level, right? And so again, I'm a member of the organization. I'm a member of the church, and I don't want to see anything bad happen to them, either in the cybersecurity space, but also they have some IT challenges as well, or opportunities where I can help and support. And so I provide them a few hours of support every month and provide some insights, go and map or print or to install a new printer or update an operating system or go through and like, hey, like let's take a look at, like this. We had a recently a business email, not compromised, but there was a message that came out that was impersonating our pastor and going in and like asking for like gift cards, them to go purchase gift cards for the the
Mhm.
upcoming Christmas extravaganza that we were going to have at our church. And so a lot of that is just security awareness training. And so I do that support. The second thing that I do is I provide an apprenticeship program and by virtue of my business. And so once or twice a year, we open the doors to 10 individuals that are looking to break into GRC as an entry level GRC analyst. And we provide training. So we do the introduction into cybersecurity fundamentals and GRC principles. And then we transition into some more practical hands-on application. If I have small, mid-sized business clients that I can do some project work for and then anonymize that data and then allow them to help support and complete some of those projects. By all means, we allow those participants to do that, but I also curate some simulated environments where we work through some things like how do we create security awareness training videos, or how do we help an organization update their incident response plan. And so we go through that, and then we help them with kind of career transition, where we help them update their resume by virtue of their previous experience, because they have a lot of previous experience that might not be directly IT or cybersecurity related, but they're transferable skills like communication, critical thinking, problem solving, being a good team player. Those types of things translate into the GRC world very well. And so we pair that with the information that they acquired and the skills that they acquired as a part of the apprenticeship program in the first two phases. And then we update their resumes, help them update their resumes, help them update their LinkedIn profiles, and then build the confidence that they need in order to apply for and interview for entry level GRC roles. But also with the understanding that there aren't a whole lot of entry level GRC roles that are out there. So we teach them how to use other entry points to pivot into some of the roles that they're doing. I just literally this morning or this afternoon, I had one of my apprenticeship participants from last cohort contact me yesterday. She's like, "Hey, I got by virtue of her network, she got introduced to a role. She thought it was going to be help desk. I'm like, hey, actually, we think that we'd actually want you to be a technical dispatcher for their help desk. And it actually had some built-in cybersecurity and GRC level roles with like asset management, configuration management type of deals. Um, and so she ended up, just got notification about an hour or two ago that she actually got the position. And so I was super excited about that. That is literally the culminating purpose of the apprenticeship program, is for them to eventually transition into a role. So she was super excited about that. And so those are the things that I do. That apprenticeship program is completely free to charge for those free of charge for those participants. And I just want to see them win, because we have a lot of gaps out here in the GRC space and the cybersecurity space. And the more opportunity that we can have to extend to people that want to break in and fill those gaps, especially considering GRC ain't super sexy, I just want to do my part to help fill those gaps.
Well, I love it. That's just excellent work you're doing there, Will. And if you could give me a link to where people can get more information about that internship program and apply for it, please share that with me, and it will be in the description below. Uh,
Absolutely.
Phenomenal work you're doing there, and then thank you for doing that and paying it forward in industry. So that's just wonderful. When you were just talking about the mentorship and so forth for helping people go from other careers that might be adjacent or like you said, I love the transferable skills. Years ago, I think it was at the Arizona Technology Summit several years ago. I was on a panel, and the end of the day panel, it was a couple double masters, a couple PhDs were on a panel with me, and at the time I did not have my WGU bachelor's. That's another
Mhm.
story, but I'm the only one on the panel without a college degree, and so I'm on this panel, and a lady stood up with a question, and she had gotten some certifications and done some training courses that were sponsored by the city. And so she had a couple certifications, but she had a hard time getting that initial break, getting her foot in the door with a company,
Mhm.
because she had 20 plus years as an Army nurse. So she got out the
Mm.
Army, and so when people would look at her resume, like, well, why don't you just go into the medical field? There's plenty of hospitals. That's her response. She literally got told from people as she's trying to pivot her career into something she wants to do now. She did that. She wants to do something that wants to do cyber. And she hears there's all these
Right.
openings in cyber. The PhDs, the two PhDs quickly said, "Oh yeah, just target service desk help desk." And I quickly raised my hand and said, "Please hand me the mic." I said, "Please disregard what these guys said. You have over 20 something years of experience where you had to deal with incidents, having to respond to just really high pressure situations as a nurse. So therefore, you know
Mhm.
how to communicate, you know how to deal with people, you know how to handle hectic
Mhm.
situations. You're perfect for management. You just got to find." And so my recommendation was look for a deputy program manager, look for a deputy director role. And
Mhm.
I keyed in on the word deputy because deputies, as we know, do all the work. And so if you get a deputy role, you're going to get your hands dirty. You're going to learn so
Yeah.
much. And as soon as you get on top of things, you're primed to fill up the role because that person's going to look good because of you. They're going to move onward and upward into the corporate ladder or to another business, and the seat will be vacated for your ascending the throne. And we had a conversation after the panel, just me and her, because again, telling people, service desk may not be it is an avenue to get in and move upward.
Mhm.
But what I like to advocate for folks that are coming from 10, 15, 20 years of another career is just what you said, those transferable skills. You just got to be able to
Mhm.
get your resume, focused and tailored to highlight, accentuate the positive, downplay the negative, right?
Right.
And I love that you work with people, especially when you mention their LinkedIn. So, man, kudos to you for helping people out and doing the tremendous work you do. I know your time is valuable, and I do want to respect your time. So, what I like to do now is I like to kind of give you the last word. So, this is take a couple minutes, and whether you want to explain to people, hey, cyber's ready for you, or GRC, how they can connect with you, etc. But the floor is yours.
Absolutely. And I appreciate it. Again, this has been a huge opportunity and a huge privilege and an honor to be on this podcast. Um, I am a strong advocate of just having a growth mindset. And too many times we get caught in our own heads and we think that a certain job or a certain role is too technical. Cybersecurity is, oh, I got to know how to code. I have to know how to configure systems. And you talk yourself out of even trying and pursuing this path. And what I'm saying is, although GRC isn't completely absent of technical, GRC is a path that you can take in order to help bridge some of that gap. It gives you these opportunities. There are several opportunities, and this is why I always say when people are interested in my apprenticeship program, especially when it's limited to just 10 people once or twice a year, I say go to YouTube in your university and then maximize the free. There are so many free resources out there that can help you kind of bridge that gap and be able to establish some of that technical knowledge. They have complete video series on YouTube that you can review and look at and build up those skill sets in order to do it. They have free certifications like ISC2, which is certified in cybersecurity, that
CC.
takes you
Yep.
from beginner over into like now I'm familiar and comfortable with the foundational principles of cybersecurity. So, but this has to be predicated upon a growth mindset. If you believe that you can, you will. And that is my encouragement to anybody to get into this. Just take the first step. And once you take that first step, hey, reach out to people like Jim West, like me, that have been like I'm not nearly as experienced as Jim West, and has all the accolades, 200 something certifications and licenses on LinkedIn. However, because he's so willing to provide the advice that he gave that nurse that was seeking out guidance on how to navigate this job market, there are resources out there that are available to you if you just reach out and ask. And so I make myself available to anybody that wants to kind of break in and get some advice. And those are all the things that are necessary in order to move forward. That's what I would leave with anybody. Growth mindset, be willing to take the first step.
Excellent. Great, great advice there. And anyone that wants to follow Will and the tremendous work he does, we're going to have his LinkedIn profile and any socials he wants you to connect with him in the description below. So, Will, please give me all the links and we'll make sure they're in the description below.
Absolutely.
And keep doing the great work you're doing. I mean, I am just color me impressed because the work that you're doing for your local community, your internship program, you're just helping a tremendous amount of people year after year. Man, again, we need so many more folks like you in industry, man. We could move mountains if we just have more folks, and that's what we do. We need you watching right now. Click on some of these links. Be curious, mindset, everything that Will said. He's on it. He's exactly right. So you can read and comprehend. You could do this. You could enter into cybersecurity. So Will, thank you so much for your time. It's been an honor talking to you.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much. It's been an honor and a privilege. I appreciate you and all the work that you're doing, and I am a fan,
Well,
100%.
thank you, Will. I'm a fan of yours.